I'm going to start this video with Jake Bro, and I'm going to end this video with Jake Bro, because something I was talking about yesterday, that is this, I was talking about the nuke tests and how Russia was doing it, and then the U.S. was doing it, and he corrected part of the record here. Now, he says this: I was a Minuteman III launch officer for the U.S. Air Force. These launches are planned years in advance, and 4 are conducted a year from Vandenberg. This scheduled launch had nothing to do with the current events or statements made from Trump or Russia this week. It looked like it was something that was going on from Russia and Trump was talking about, well, if you're going to do it, we're going to do it. Maybe he knew that they were about to do it, and that's why he was saying it. But yeah, so he's correcting the record. I was off, and I'll freely admit that. So thank you for correcting me. Okay. And he wasn't correcting me directly, but he was just putting that out there. Okay. NATO chief. Now, this is the big story. The big story is it's not going to be over anytime soon. We're looking at Pokrovsk like, oh no, what if Pokrovsk falls? Even if it falls, it's going to take years to get through the fortress belt. And Ukraine is gearing up for years of fighting. I don't mean ending in 2025. I don't even mean 2026. It might be 2027. They're going to fight until they prevail, right? NATO chief urges you allies to prepare for long-term confrontation with Russia. Rutte said that member states of the alliance must not be naive about Moscow's intentions. We must also be ready, he emphasized, calling for sustained defense investment and stronger coordination among NATO countries. He also said this: Russia's unprovoked war against Ukraine is the most obvious example of the threat, but the danger posed by Russia will not end when this war does. For the foreseeable future, Russia will remain a destabilizing force in Europe and the world. I think that's true. The only way that you get around this is okay, I was talking to a history professor the other day, and I said, hey, we were talking about things in America, and I said, well, how do you reset so that, because we're kind of at each other in the United States, right? And he said, well, you could lose a world war. That's not the answer I was going for, but he said, historically, that's how things get reset. And then we got to talking about Russia, and that's why Russia hasn't reset where Germany and Japan have. And yeah, so Russia needs to lose in order to reset, in order to join the family of nations in the world again, and without trying to kill everybody. Okay. Sikorsky said, he's Poland's foreign minister, says we have a war at our borders. He's right. He's right on the border of Ukraine. Ukraine plans to resist for 3 years. Look at this, 3 years. Our job is to provide resources. Russia's economy is already weakening. I'll show you some more evidence of that in just a bit. But right now, Germany is planning to increase military support to Ukraine by $3 billion in 2026. And Ukraine gains access to $8.4 billion in EU defense funds as Parliament plans to vote before the year's end. The move integrates Ukraine into joint EU defense and R&D projects with $6.1 billion for capability development and $3.4 billion for research. So that's good. And that's on top of the NATO ambassador, U.S. ambassador to NATO, Whitaker, talking about another $2 billion in U.S. arms sales just recently. So yeah, there's that. We're looking at the long haul. Trump was saying, I spoke to Putin 2 weeks ago, and he said, we've been trying to end that war in Ukraine for 10 years, and we've never been able to. Now it's up to you to fix it. Huh? If Putin's saying that he doesn't want to end the war, he's not interested in trying to end the war. He thinks he can win, and so he keeps pressing on. Here, again, I was talking about what's actually happening in Russia. This is Steve Rosenberg from the BBC talking about reading Russian news, and he looks at Russian newspapers. Today, one Russian paper claims that Donald Trump, quote, behaves like a butterfly, flitting from flower to flower, but no, that's being unfair to butterflies, unquote. That's what I mean when I talk about he can zig or he can zag. He's done far more zigs toward Russia than zags toward Ukraine, but he's hard to pin down. And it goes on, plus a number of loss-making Russian companies goes up. Freight loading volume in Russian railways goes down. Okay, so the economy is struggling in Russia and is going to continue to struggle, and it's only going to get worse over time. Now, if you're like me, you've wondered for some time, why kidnap children? Well, okay, so part of that is Russia's population has gone down significantly over the last, since 2014. It's actually, I saw something that showed that since 2014, Russia has fewer in population than they had before 2014. That's That's not the right direction for any country, right? But there's something more than just restocking the population. Second Russian narrative regarding, this is from the Institute for the Study of War, second Russian narrative regarding deported Ukrainian children is the novel one and seeks to present the issue of Ukrainian children as a bargaining chip for the Trump administration in Russia's quest for bilateral U.S. rapprochement. Whoa. So they're going to leverage kidnap Russian children. See, we're going to release these children and you release these sanctions and that sort of thing. That's what Russia's trying to do. Russia hopes that it can use conversations about the return of a few Ukrainian children to develop rapport with the United States, with the intent of using this rapport to further the Kremlin's political objectives in Ukraine. These Kremlin-led conversations about Ukrainian children, however, rely on Russia's ability to downplay the scale of its deportation efforts to an international audience. Yeah, that's what's been happening there. Okay, let's turn to America and look at what's happened domestically. The last couple of days, there were elections. This was largely a rebuke to the Trump administration, but there's a reason for that. A new poll finds about 70% of Americans say that groceries are more expensive than they were a year ago. About 60% of them are blaming Trump. Well, he's in power, so that's the guy that gets blamed. If Harris was in power and you still had the same kind of scenario, you would see the same rebuke go the other direction. In fact, that's what happened 4 years ago when Glenn Youngkin was elected into the governorship in Virginia. Because you were asking, or because I got a lot of pushback about this when I was talking about Mamdani, the new mayor of New York City, Mamdani promises everything to desperate New Yorkers, worrying times. Here's the cover of the New York Post. People were upset with me because I said he was a socialist or perhaps even communist. Well, this is the cover of the New York Post. On your marks, spelled as in Karl Marx, get set, Zo. Socialist Mamdani wins race for the red apple, not the big apple, which is what you call New York, but the red apple. So I'm not the only one saying this. It's something to watch. Not to compete with the Bee or the Onion. The Babylon Bee and the Onion are satirical sites, but young Mamdani supporter is torn between joining the Revolutionary Guard or the Red Guard, came to me today. And then somebody joked, and there's a reason why I'm showing you this joke, the People's Front of Judea or the Judea People's Front. If you know what that reference is, it's from Monty Python, from The Life of Brian, and I'll come back to that in just a little bit. Okay. Trump is not going to the G20 summit in South Africa. He's opting out. Putin's opting out. Putin, probably shouldn't be traveling there. And anyway, as a ICC indicted war criminal, and he's not even sending Lavrov to the summit in South Africa. So that's what's happening there. Russia is, however, helping smugglers flood Europe and UK with migrants. This is according to Philip Obagi Jr., who documents everything that Russia's doing to Africa regularly. Okay. There's a growing trend, propaganda. There's a growing trend among Kremlin propaganda arsenal is the use of seemingly independent or curious Western bloggers to aim to convince audiences that Russia is the place where all your dreams can come true. An example, one such blogger already had his channel removed from YouTube, yet has reemerged to once again preach the virtues of the Russian world, having already accumulated 27,000 subscribers in only 45 days. Okay, something's not right about that. It took me 6 months to get to 1,000 subscribers. So 27,000 in 45 days, something's up, right? But here's the kind of thing that they say. In Soviet times, this is Rena Liu. She's followed by pretty much everybody that's bad here, that like Spetsnaz 007 and others. Okay, in Soviet times, there really was a kind of stability that people in the West who never lived in socialist countries can even imagine. Well, I mean, stability if you are okay with being a slave and you don't have to worry about, moving up in the world. Things like education, healthcare, theater, summer camps, and even sanatoriums were a normal part of life. You didn't have to save up for them, and you didn't have to worry about rent hikes, medical bills, or student debt. People had far less stress, and the word anxiety simply didn't exist in everyday vocabulary because life wasn't built around constant competition or fear of losing everything overnight, she says. Okay. To that, Branislav Slanchev, he's a professor at University of California at San Diego. I interviewed him a few weeks back, said this is the most pathetic slop imaginable. unlike this doofus, I lived in this paradise. He's actually from Bulgaria. And because my dad was being a member of the Communist Party, we enjoyed certain things that others could only dream of. For example, in Bulgaria, there were special stores called Kopium. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly. I'm just trying to pronounce a Russian spelled word, where you could only buy things with dollars, which nobody outside the privileged had access to. So it's not this paradise where you don't have to, you can go to summer camp or sanatorium, you have no bills. It's not like that at all. When we lived in the Soviet Union, we ordered groceries for weekly delivery to our apartment. I very much doubt that your average Soviet citizen had Pilsen beer, black caviar, and bananas delivered to their homes in the 1980s. Soviet society was deeply unequal. The party elites monopolized access to limited resources and lived relatively lavish, by socialist standards, lives, with access to special resorts, dakas, and all that. The rest were far worse off and equal only in that they had access to perennially empty shops, standing in long lines to buy some rare marvel like a TV or a bicycle. Sunny propaganda BS isn't how most people lived at all. Yeah. Now, the interesting thing is that if you're about 50, which I'm guessing Bronislav is about that age just by looking at him, I'm 52. If you're about that, you remember the Soviet Union, and particularly if you live there, right? So you got to check your sources. Now, speaking of sources, we're just talking about these fakes, or this lady just trying to, propagandize and the other fakes and that sort of thing. Well, Jake Bro was talking about what I was talking about yesterday. Russia's creating these fake AI videos of Ukrainians surrendering. Dumb people fall for it. And I talked about it briefly. He talked about it at greater length. John Cleese of Monty Python fame said, "God bless you" to Jake Bro. I was like, whoa, John Cleese. You know who that is? That's it. He said, "Thank you, John. Your support for Ukraine means a lot." My comment here was, you were just acknowledged by the Ministry of Silly Walks. That's right. John Cleese, the actor from Monty Python. He was also Lancelot here. Remember the reference earlier about the Judean People's Front, or the People's Front of Judea? That was from The Life of Brian. This is John Cleese here. I know it's a little grainy or hard to see. But then I made another connection. Yesterday, I looked at this picture, which is from Monty Python. These are the Pythons, before I made that thumbnail that I just started with. Like, how weird is that? World coming full circle here, right? The heads opening, that was a thing for Monty Python for some weird reason I don't quite understand, but yeah. Okay, last little bit, Jake Bro again. Jake Bro's refinery bingo. It's north of 600,000. It's only about 2 o'clock in the afternoon as I'm recording this today, but we're now at $615,932.95. I'll put the link below if you want to give to that campaign. Thank you for your support, my friends, for any campaign, not just whatever I'm doing with Greg or whatever Jake Bro is doing, but anywhere that you can give, wherever your place is on the line. Thank you for your time, the likes, the shares, and the subscribes. And thank you for being the kind of person who cares about Ukraine.